All right, well, welcome back to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, of course, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, well, we had another game. We're off and running now. We're just chasing the end of the season. First off, I'm glad to be back. I know we got a guest. I want you to introduce a second, but real quick, what are you drinking first here so we can get that out of the way?
It shows you how badly I'm milking the beers in the house right now because I'm still going through the Oktoberfest, but this is the last of the Oktoberfest. So we're
Uh,
here in December and I'm finishing up the Oktoberfest, which
nice. So
again, I
I've got
know it
a
goes to September, but yeah,
so I've got
yeah.
a DDH India Pale Ale. It's called the Graveyard Shift. You can't see
Oh,
it because you can't see it because of my green screen.
it's
But on the
appropriate
Graveyard
for the
Shift, it has
Giants.
exactly it has all the main horror characters. So you've got Junior from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Jason, Michael Myers, and of course Freddy. So I figure with the nightmare of a season the Giants have had, it is
Yes, very
appropriate.
appropriate.
But
And we are joined by Colin, our longtime friend of the website and us personally. He hosts the Great Blue North Draft Report, which is one of the best websites out there for draft coverage. I highly recommend it. And for years, I mean, Colin and I go back a long time, going back to training camp in Albany, but for years he's come on to the website and answered questions from fans and is always a popular contributor on the site. So we're thrilled to have him here because we are talking draft when we should be talking playoffs, but here we are.
So Colin, real quick, the three of us will bandy about what we saw the Giants play the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Once again, I want to thank the NFL. I used to pray for them to play on Thanksgiving, and now you've gone and ruined my holiday every year for the last few years. So congrats for putting the Giants on in a game in which a lot of people watched, but it certainly wasn't going to be in demand beyond the two fan bases, both teams struggling. So we saw Drew Lock play. I want to get the feedback from both of you and what you thought. But the one guy I watched the most, and this is where I want to start, is I was paying attention to what I was hoping might be a guy that we can either maybe lean on a little bit next year or count on next year. We've been waiting to see if we can, and all I saw from this game is this guy still at this point is looking like a bust, and that's Evan Neal, who at one point looked like he was actually chasing Drew Lock for the sack, but he was really just trying to figure out where Micah Parsons had gone. So some thoughts from you guys on the game, and let's start specifically with Evan Neal. And, Colin, what'd you think of Evan Neal finally getting some playing time and what he looked like? Oh, Colin might have frozen there.
Well, he still looks out of position there. I know in one of the questions, Eric mentioned the questions on the BBI, and I saw one about Evan Neal. Why wasn't he moved to guard? It's something I'm curious about. I'd like to see him go in there. He's still a very physical run blocker, but he just doesn't have the feet to play right tackle, as far as I can tell. He sets his feet too soon and can't change direction. And if he's lined up with a Micah Parsons, he's got no chance at all. I'd like to see him go inside. He's got one more year on his contract inside, and I think he could be a half decent guard. And that kind of move has been made by people over the years fairly successfully. But I think at this point in time, thinking of him as anything like a long-term solution at right tackle is kind of dreaming in Technicolor.
And Eric, your thoughts on that as well? The one thing that Colin said that I'm concerned about, what I used to say is maybe he takes the William Roberts route, which goes from tackle to guard. But the thing about William Roberts is he was always kind of known as a dancing bear. He had the feet to move and pull and do things. It was tackle he just didn't seem to do so well with. But Neal just doesn't seem to show the movement skills. Period.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin. I used to, for years and years and years, I've said things are not as bad as they appear to be when the Giants are losing, and they're not as good as you think they are when they're winning. But right now, this season couldn't have gone worse for this team, other than maybe Daniel Jones getting injured and we getting hit with the $23 million thing. At least we didn't get nailed with that. But this has been a disaster. And the latest game to me is really starting to hit me, bring that home to me, because once again, Dallas sweeps us. Once again, they're backup quarterbacks in the game, and is beating us, and our offensive line in this game looked like our offensive line did last year. And we thought we were past this. And again, we know their injuries are a factor here, but once again, not only is Evan Neal can't seem to pass block, but he's hurt again. So there are going to be some people say, well, maybe he's not playing well because he's got a hip injury now. I don't care at this point because he can't seem to even stay healthy for a few games to play. It's not just Neal. John Michael Schmitz doesn't look like he can play. So every offensive lineman, this regime, and I want to root for this regime. I want Schoen to succeed. I want Daboll to succeed. But every draft pick this team has made on the offensive line, Josh Ezeudu, McKeithen, all of these guys, none of them have panned out, and it's horrible because some of these are premium draft picks. I mean, you're talking about Evan Neal is a top 10 pick. John Michael Schmitz is a second round pick. They were counting on, and the two worst offensive linemen in this game. My big takeaway from this game, there were a lot of things to take away, were how bad Evan Neal and John Michael Schmitz played. And I can't get past that right now. And when we're discussing the situation with upper management in this team, because the two guys you're counting on now look like two guys you might have to replace. And I don't know where they go from here again, because you could say Neal is, whatever reason is a bust, but now you have to think the center is a problem now. So I was just very discouraged. This season is, I don't like Dallas. I hate losing to Dallas. To get swept by them bothers me. And on top of that, to see the personnel issues now popping up in this game, and to have Dallas living in our backfield play after play after play. I wasn't the pressure rate 41% in this game.
It's
I think
pretty high.
Dallas was hitting lock out, 41% of the time, or in his face 41% of the time. You can't win like that. It doesn't matter who's the quarterback at that point.
Right. And Colin, just one of the big, I don't want to say fallacies, but one of the things that a lot of people are kind of complaining about on the site about Neal, they want to say, oh, he was a reach, but when he was coming out though, he was a highly rated offensive tackle. Your thoughts on that? And then where did that go wrong? Like, was everybody wrong in the scouting of him, or were there concerns that his feet might not be able to stay up on as a tackle?
Well, there are concerns about everybody when they come out. No, this is how the draft works. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was complaining about the two guys we took, and I said right off the top, the likelihood of a first rounder being a really good player is about 50%. So, the odds we're only going to get one guy out of those guys. I'd like to see Tebow be a little more productive. No, I mean, Neal was a perfectly reasonable pick at that point in time. And in fact, in terms of the fan base, had they not picked Neal at that point in time, you would have had a street riot.
Yeah.
Right.
And why that happens, again, we're talking. One of the things are inefficient. The likelihood of any draft being a really good player just isn't all that. Maybe 30%, maybe even 25% probability that he's going to be a good player. I do agree with Eric. I've been thinking about this myself this morning, that they're going to have to do something at center. I think they bring him back next year, but I would really love to see them go out and get a decent veteran center, have him at least come in and compete with Schmitz. And if he continues the way he does, $1 million a year guy, but you can get useful players who can at least do the job for that position. That's the one good thing there. You do have three pretty good offensive linemen with Runyon and Elumaner and Thomas. Got a couple other spots to fill on the inside. I don't think we're that far away, but I agree. Center's a really, really important position nowadays in the National Football League, where you're putting a lot of receivers out there. They call the plays. They got to have some movement skills. And he got run over. I don't know, was this game or the last game where somebody just literally picked him up and
Oh, it was Vita Vea for Tampa Bay, just
yeah.
buried him.
Yeah, and just dropped him in and you just can't have that, as you're saying. I mean, at least you got to hold him up at the line of scrimmage. So I mean that is being disappointing. But again, the likelihood that he was going to be a good player wasn't all that great at the beginning. So as I say, it's why I don't like using draft picks to fill holes. I much prefer to get your impact players, get good players, as opposed to just trying to fill a hole that way. There are more efficient ways to do it.
Yeah, one of the toughest parts, Eric, filling need, which the 2019 Giants could be accused of. They felt they had a need at quarterback. They filled it by just taking the guy that was there, not necessarily the guy that was rated in that range where we were picking. The problem with taking a guy at a need position, as Colin was saying, is like if that guy fails, it was already a position that was a hole. So now you've dug the hole even deeper if you fail. Whereas at least if you're getting impact players regardless, Giants of 1984, you could say they did not need a linebacker. And they took Carl Banks. I mean,
Right.
it's sometimes there's just a player, and that's the reverse argument. And so that's where I'll throw this next. The reverse argument was the Giants went and took the best player available that they thought would build the team up in terms of Nabers. I feel like that's the one time you really can't apply the best player thing because that player is so reliant upon a different position to really achieve any of what their capabilities are there, that you threw a receiver out there and you were hoping and praying the quarterback was going to win.
Well, I will say this. Look, there is an inherent logic in what the Giants did. Okay. So I'm not going to completely discount what they did. What the problem the Giants are having right now is everything that they did looks like the wrong decision. So
Yeah.
everybody in the fan base is really angry right now and thinking with they're not thinking, they're reacting with their emotions.
Sure.
I get it. I'm mad too.
Yep.
But the argument now, we talked about this early on. If one of those other three quarterbacks that went after the Giants ended up looking good, there was going to be hell to pay. But you can make the argument that if you're going to follow your draft board and you trust your scouts and you trust your GM, and they clearly have the receiver ranked as an impact player, and the quarterback is somebody that may not be the guy, that makes sense because you have multiple needs. And I think Colin has mentioned this in the past that wide receiver is one of the premium positions now. And if you
Right.
get teams that are contending for a Super Bowl, they have a superstar wide receiver. So I get the logic, which the problem for the Giants, and we can go down the list, free agency and the draft, the things that they did or didn't do are coming back to bite them in the ass. And everybody on our side who is mad, rightfully so, is pointing at these things and saying, look at the quarterback Denver got. Why didn't we get that quarterback? Why did we let Barkley get away? Why did we let McKinney go? So everything is piling on the Giants right now, and it's a bad look for them. So I understand. The one thing I will say is this. The one thing that has bothered me about people who follow the draft for decades is just because you draft a player at a position does not mean you fix the position. If you draft the wrong guy, you're going to have to address the position again, either in the draft or free agencies down the road. So I always didn't like, when we get into the fourth, fifth, sixth round, and even before that, when you see people on a website or on social media saying, why didn't we draft a offensive tackle, or why didn't we draft a linebacker? They think position rather than who is available at all the positions. So
Right.
if you take an offensive lineman in the third round, but the guy stinks, you didn't really fix the position. That's always been my criticism is you got to look at who's available too. But the problem the Giants have is the guys that they did take in the third round don't look good. You take a Josh Zudu, they did
I was
take the
going to say, you
offensive
didn't randomly
lineman.
pick a third
Yeah,
round offensive lineman.
and it didn't work out. So
Well,
Yeah, let me just throw in a comment there about the Nabers pick. I have no problem with that at all. Nabers was as a prospect. I'm talking about a prospect here. Unfortunately, I mean, he was just one of the best rookies in the league in a while until he got hurt. He got hurt, and he hasn't played as well since. But he's a special player, and I think you can justify it on the, or it was a special prospect. And he had a chance to be a really elite down the road, but you're not going to get a whole lot of shot at guys with his potential anyway. I was a little bit surprised the Giants didn't take Bo Nix. He's gotten some headlines and stuff like that, but and the Broncos have obviously done well. But you look at his numbers, and they're good, but are they great? Are they elite kind of stuff? Not yet. We'll hold our breath. And of course, the other two guys who would have been the first two guys the Giants taken, Pennix and McCarthy, because they were the two highest rated guys, haven't played. So we
Right.
don't know anything about them. You can't say one of those three quarterbacks comes to be a star. We blew it. Um, it almost has to be the next guy. But again, I don't have any problem with that, and I agree with Eric. It's I used to throw things at the TV when I'd see the Mel Kipers of the world on draft saying, well, the Buckaroos, they really addressed that issue they have at cornerback. Let's see the guy play before we say that. And I'm sure we're going to talk about quarterbacks here. Good chance the Giants pick first. Good chance they take a quarterback. Still, you look at the quarterbacks taken first overall in the last little while. Bryce Young, Trevor Lawrence. His team is actually picking first right now if the draft were held this week. So there's no guarantees when you do that. That again, it's all about probabilities and things like that. So we'll have to hold our breath until we see if the guy can play or not.
One of the things I kind of hate the most about the general feeling of Giants should have done this or they should have done that in terms of picking this guy. It's always looking back. At that moment, like the argument about Neal, at that moment, Neal was rated one of the highest tackles coming out. There was him, and I think Cross was probably right there with him. They had different skill sets. Cross was more of a pass blocker, a little weaker in the run game, where Neal was just a bigger, stronger guy who supposedly was all, potential all-world offensive lineman coming out of Alabama. So it's easy to say it now because he struggled horribly, but when we were all going to the draft, Thibodeau was the number one ranked player a year before. It was that ankle injury kind of slowed him and he slid a little bit, but he was still upper echelon of prospects. So it's always with that rear view mentality of theirs. So now you're looking, I think the one thing you could, though, criticize the Giants about is more the methodology or the process that led them to where they go in how they determine. Daboll and Schoen come on board. They decline the 5th-year option on Jones. They're going to go into that season. We really mustered or manufactured a lot of early wins by just not turning the ball over and getting turnovers. Struggled later in the season, but we make the playoffs, beat the Vikings. We all know how that happened. And then the choices that they made in the 23 offseason really impacted everything since. But even still, this offseason, it was all about, okay, we like apparently 3 guys. One we knew was going to be gone. The second one we expected to be gone, and that being Daniels. The third one being May, and that's where maybe it was for show, maybe it wasn't that they were interested, but I think you had to know the Patriots weren't going to walk away from that without a quarterback. So at that point, they decide to get weapons for Jones. And I think it's the methodology that drives a lot of people crazy when you're like, but Jones wasn't really that guy. So if you do rely on a Nabers and he is an all-world talent, you got to be very careful, though. Those are diva kind of players. They want the ball. They want to be stars. They're used to being stars. And you gave them a Ford Pinto at quarterback to throw to a Porsche at wide receiver. And we're seeing the results. So is it, in your thoughts, or do you believe that we have the right GM coach combination for some of the things that we've been doing and what needs to happen going forward?
If you're asking me, yeah, let me. One of my favorite lines too is, hindsight makes geniuses of us all.
Right.
And I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was complaining about. You remember we took a defensive tackle a few years ago. I'm old and I forget people's names. He's from North Carolina. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. He had
yeah.
slid down in the draft. He had some off-field
Well, he
stuff.
hadn't played as a senior because he'd been suspended for
Yeah,
uh,
who the hell was that?
taking
Well, we'll
improper
find
benefits. He went to a training camp that somebody paid, and the guy was saying to me, I mean, the guy was terrible. Didn't you see him play? And I said, well, it's kind of hard to see him play as a senior because he didn't play. But as a junior, he was a top 15 prospect. And no, I mean when he was with the Giants. He was awful. Why would they take a guy who was so awful? Because, anyway, you get that stuff. I could go on at length here. I have been mortally unhappy or disappointed with what I've seen from Brian Daboll this year. This is a horribly coached team. I used to, I've done a little bit of coaching in my time, and I sit there 3 hours on Sunday afternoon, just literally every quarter saying, what the is going on here? I do not understand a whole lot of stuff that's going on on both sides of the ball confuses the heck out of me. I had a speaking about the Dallas games, um, in that first Dallas game, we weren't all that far off with Dallas this year. Would we lose by 3-7 or something like that? But Malik Nabers caught 12 passes that game. And it obviously was the last game before he got hurt, or he got hurt in that game. But I went back and looked at the numbers, and of those 12 passes, 6 of them were for 5 yards or less. And it would be one thing if Jones was under real duress that game, but he wasn't. Parsons wasn't playing. He had lots of time. Uh, those were the routes he was running. And I watched this guy in college a lot, and he was just dynamic. You get him 8, 10, 12 yards downfield, turn him into the middle, let him catch the ball and run with it, and he is just incredibly explosive. And yet, we see him running all these short routes. And speaking of the second Dallas game, Eric was talking about the pressure they were under. And I've always been kind of a defensive, coach-minded type of guy. But when Dallas, when we were in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, what you saw was that the Cowboys brought 8 guys to the line of scrimmage, literally every play. Um, they didn't come with all 8 every time. In fact, they very seldom did. But you didn't know, or the Giants didn't know who was coming
Right,
and
right.
where they were coming from. So, your guard lines up. He's got a guy in front of him. The next thing he knows, he's got to pick up Parsons, who's coming from somewhere else. And it was just as you say, Locke was under pressure all the time. You watched the Giants when we had Dallas in 3rd and 7, and as you say, we had a third string quarterback there, known for turning the ball over, and every damn time it was 4 guys at the line of scrimmage putting their hands into the offensive tackles, lineman's chest and trying to push him back, and everybody else dropping 10, 12 yards off the ball. No wonder the guy was comfortable playing against us. We never put him under pressure. We never tried. And again, it's what we've seen all year long. It just seems to me you're 2-10. Um, Maybe you try something different than what you've been doing all season long, and I haven't
Right.
seen that at all. We got Shane Bowen in, who's supposed to be a very aggressive guy. I was looking at some film from last year. I don't see any difference at all from our defense the way it was lined up last year to this year, um, which leads me to believe that Daboll's the guy who's setting the schemes. Shane Bowen calls the plays, whatever you want to call that. But yeah, I Daboll's got to go. Um,
Mm.
Shane is a different thing. I think he's a bright young guy. It's more like as Eric said, it's just everything they've done. most of which made some sense, but just hasn't worked out. Um, I guess there's a part of me would like to see him stick around, and because I think, as I say, he's a bright young guy. But at the same time, this is, with the Jones thing, with the Saquon thing, there's a malaise in this team right now, and I'd really, we need a reset here, and it's going to be a tough one, but certainly Daboll, in my view, has to go. Shane's 50-50. There are other good people out there who can do that job. So we'll just have to see how they play it out.
Right.
Yeah, I just
So
want to jump in
real quick,
too.
real quick though.
Oh,
Sorry, real
sorry.
quick. The guy you're talking about is Marvin Austin.
Yeah, I was
It
going to
was
say
Yes,
that.
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at the list. We've drafted a number of guys from North Carolina. Marcus Schoen was there, and so was BJ Hill. So a number of people.
Nice.
But I want to piggyback on something that Colin said when he said the word malaise. And there's just an awful feeling around this franchise right now. This team, in my opinion, again, just one man's opinion, should not be this bad. I mean, we're horrifically bad right now, and you can feel it, you can sense it. There's no confidence with this team. The fan base has no confidence in this team. We expect to lose. I think the players expect to lose. I don't. That's why I think the season's been an utter and complete disaster for everyone involved, and it sounds like I'm gang piling on Shane and Daboll here, but I don't know how you can defend this right now because it is so. We're historically bad in the 100th year history franchise of this franchise. I mean, everything that we've done has gone wrong, and it's just. I don't think I'm not. I don't feel confident about playing any team out there. Be it the
Right.
Jaguars, or you could argue we may beat the Saints. We could beat the Saints this weekend, but I wouldn't make a bet on
I'm
that.
not.
I don't sense any confidence at all in this team, and that has to at some point. You've got to have a coach like a Parcells or a Coughlin, who just it just radiates down from leadership, and the rest of the team responds. And right now, I don't get the sense the team is responding to the leadership here. Colin also made an interesting comment. That's the first time I've heard this, and I know he's speculating here, but Daboll maybe having a hand in the defensive alignment too. The defense is just horrific right now, and I was as much as people were focused on how the offense was performing against Dallas. I couldn't believe how bad our defense has gotten, and the way we made the Dallas running game come to light. We make everybody look good now. If you've noticed, the teams that the Giants play tend to go on a run. We were the get well team right now for a lot of teams.
Right. We are.
But look at the Panthers now. The Panthers are playing at a different level now, and the quarterback there than once. Hey, play the Giants, you'll get better. I mean, that's I don't want to be like one of these guys, fire everyone, but I don't know how you survive this at this point.
Yeah.
Well, also,
Let me jump in, John. I have a theory, which I'm working on. I have lots of theories, but one of my theories is that in many ways, and I'm going to say, I think agree with Eric. I'm shocked that this team is 2-10. I mean, this is not the 1970s team. We have some good players there, and in a roundabout way, I'm kind of confident going forward, or at least this is not a 2-10 team, I don't think. But I just have a feeling that that they lost the room, the players, um, literally the moment Saquon signed with Philadelphia. We tend to look at the players as automatons, guys who go out and play by road kind of a thing. But and the bottom line is they're people, they're young guys. They got families, they got friends, they got hopes, they got dreams, they got emotions. And I can imagine that the shock in that room, that they're going to look upon Saquon as he was their leader. He was the best player. He was the face of the franchise. From all accounts, he was a great teammate, and he was a friend of all those guys. And A, we let him go, and B, you just say to yourself as a player, how the hell do we get better uh, um, if at that that we're trying to chase here. And it's kind of interesting in a way that the Giants on their 10 losses actually played pretty well in 7 of them, but 3 of them they got blown out. One was the Minnesota game, which was the first game after Saquon left. The second one was the Philadelphia game where we were obviously playing Saquon, and then you had the third game after Jones left. And it's almost like the players have, and they were upset about Jones leaving too, although not as much as I suspect with Saquon. It's almost like, subconsciously they've sort of said, you guys want to tank. Okay, we'll tank, kind of a thing. Because as you say, I mean, you just don't get the feeling that, and we got New Orleans coming in, which is not a very good team, and I have no confidence that they're really going to be able to compete or not. So clearly, there's something going on. I'd love to see them get a guy like Mike Vrabel to come in and coach the team. I think he would bring that kind of that kind of Coughlin Parcells toughness that we really haven't had for a while. But we'll have to see how all that works out. But clearly, there's something going on that if you're not in the room, you're really not going to know what's about.
Well, I think there's a couple things. So I'll do them one at a time. The first thing is going back to what you said first about Daboll can't come back, and I think Eric and I are on the same page as well. Is that my biggest problem is it's not just fire the coach per se, right? Like that's easy. That's easy just to throw that out there. Since 22, after they started 6-2, he was 3-5-1, 6-11, 2-10. You have a steadily and very steeply declining return on him as a coach. And the one thing that I keep looking back at is in moments where the first bad stuff starts to happen, you look at the woulda, coulda, shoulda in a positive way. Oh, we were so close against Buffalo. Oh, we should have beaten the Jets. As the bad starts to pile up, you begin to look back at, oh man, we got really lucky when we beat Tennessee. They missed a field goal. We beat Carolina barely, and that was after they turned the ball over twice in the first quarter. And we still barely won that game at the end of the game. So we could have been 0-2 in 22, and we're having a much different conversation overall going forward. But the results from quite a while now have been going down. And my problem with Daboll is, and we've talked about this numerous times, if you think of a football game and a football plan, like a plan when you go into a game, as like almost like Legos, right? Each piece locks in and you plan. I never get the sense of what the hell he's attempting to do, because lots of times when certain moments come up, he does something that doesn't fit kind of the way he had been playing the game up to that point. There have been gaffes with timeouts. There's been gaffes with challenges where you're like, why are you challenging that? There have been gaffes with player personnel. Punt returner in 22. Last year, I think we had the same problem again. We had a kicker problem last year. We had a kicker problem this year. You knew you had an injured kicker going into a game, and then he actually gets injured again, and you lose that game because of those decisions. So there are so many things now that are beginning to pile up in a resume of should he or shouldn't he. The pile on the should not is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I agree with you. I feel like somebody like a Vrabel, but the problem is there are a number of teams that are already looking and will be looking. And are those teams getting the head start, and those teams that are going to jump in, are they going to be more attractive to jump on board with than the Giants, who we used to get by on history? And the Giants are they're a legacy franchise. To coach for them is a big deal. We haven't won anything of significance since 2011. Is this really the place you want to go, where we go through coaches every 2 and this would be every 3 years? I don't know. Thoughts on just the Giants as being a destination for a coach?
Can I just jump in one quick
Please.
second too? Because Colin said something that I never thought, and this is why I enjoy having Colin on, because he made, I think, a very intelligent comment here. We think about the psychology a lot of fans, but we don't think about the psychology of the team. And Colin raised an interesting point that I didn't even think of. What is the impact in the locker room of the and it's not just Saquon, a series of decisions by this team now that seem to have backfired. Now, whether you agree with that or the moves is a different story. We could all make pros and cons to whether Leonard Williams should have been traded. Let Xavier McKinney go, Saquon. We could go on and on. There's a lot of people. Julian Love. We keep going on. But the players themselves are also exposed to the same noise that the fans are. They're on social media, they listen to the news, watch Sports Center, they do all this stuff. So what Colin just said is actually something very interesting. Has maybe the players have lost confidence in this franchise, the decision makers in this franchise, and making the right decision, because all the decisions the team seems to be making right now seem to be making the wrong. I mean, they look at Green Bay and they say, oh my goodness, there's a Defensive of the Year candidate. So is Leonard Williams. Now, Saquon Barkley, not only did we lose him, now you can make the argument, which I've said before, Barkley was only really good here 2 of 6 seasons, because the other 4 seasons he was hurt. But right now, the players aren't focused on that. They're seeing what he's doing in Philadelphia. So that may be consciously or subconsciously impacting the they may have to move on from these people, from these guys, because the players may not believe in them anymore.
Well, you know,
I think that's a really good point Colin raised.
Well, you know, the thing I said about Daboll's game planning, about it locking together and not, you don't see the consistency of what it is. It's the same thing in the decision making, the inconsistency in which we do things. In reality, if you were going to move on from Saquon, and you and I have talked about this numerous times, you should have done it in 22 at the trade deadline when his value was as high, 23 as well, when his value was high. But when you didn't do it, you almost committed yourself to being like, this guy is a foundational piece. We need to bring him back.
And the worst thing happened, in a way, Hard Knocks came back.
Oh, that made it even worse.
In the ass, because the owner is on tape saying
that's exactly.
He warned them.
Well, see, and that's the other thing too, right? Because now you've got Jones. This is the inconsistency. You bring Jones, you pay him a ton of money, and now he's playing poorly, but yet you continue to go to the microphone and Colin, feel free to jump in on this part, because Eric and I have bandied this about. Yeah. I've felt all along that either Daboll and Schoen had been told from day one this year that they were going to come back. They had to play Jones to prove yes or no he is the guy, but you're going to come back, because that's the only reason I can see that Daboll comes and goes, Jones is our best chance to win. When you watched week after week after week, nothing happened. I know the other guys aren't necessarily better, but what does that tell the rest of the team when they watch and they see that you can't score points? Your quarterback won't throw the ball to the guy when he's wide open on a flea flicker. He takes the sack instead, and they literally watch the air just be taken out of the balloon. But you go to the mic and go, he's our best chance to win.
Well, I'll take, Dex Lawrence at his word. And right now, he's the team leader. He was furious when they got rid of Jones, because he said he was our best chance to win. I mean, they're working with the other guys. Tommy DeVito is okay. We've seen Drew Lock enough, he hasn't played all that much, but I mean, they're no better. And at least, Jones always had a little bit of upside there. And again, they work with these guys, and they kind of know the feeling. I don't know in that regard. I think at that point in time it was kind of gone. The point I made with I had no problem with in a sense with Saquon moving on, because my assumption was that we would be revamping the offense. We would, that we had speed at wide receiver with Nabers and Slayton and Hyatt and Robinson. We're going to spread the field, and we're going to run a different kind of offense. And instead, it's almost like we pulled it in. We've been playing 2 tight ends much of the year, 2 wide receivers, and playing almost more conservatively than we were with Saquon. It just doesn't make any sense. And in terms of offense, I watch a lot of football because part of my job here, and I see week after week after week other quarterbacks, throwing passes to wide open receivers who've been schemed open. Um, and I say to myself, we never see that.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, a little thing like a minor thing. If you're going to put a guy like Manhurts as a tight end out there, okay, and he blocks, nobody's covering him. Um, Leak him out. He's going to be wide open every time as an outlet. He's not going to score, get big yardage. We've thrown 2 passes to him all year long. We might as well have had an extra offensive lineman out there for all the
Right.
good he's doing. Interesting that I think he got one or two touchdowns on the 2 passes he's caught. Same thing with Theo Johnson. We only seem to use him when we're way behind. Tyrone Tracy is a 4-year wide receiver in college. He's fast. He's a great receiver. And I keep saying, why aren't we, wheeling this guy out of the backfield on third downs, and even getting him going upfield because he's fast. Get him on a cornerback, on a linebacker, and you're going to make some plays that way. But we don't do any of that. It's like as John said, we got a game plan here, and once we've got our game plan, we're sticking to it. And doesn't seem to matter.
But
But yeah, there's been a lot to be frustrated about watching this team this year.
that's another good point, and that's what John has been getting at, is there doesn't seem to be a plan. So early on when we started the podcast, we thought they would do what you just said, Colin. We thought they would spread things out and run a different offense, and maybe to the offensive line gain some cohesion. There'd be a lot of short, medium, intermediate type passing, but they would use a lot of run after the catch. We talked about Tyrone Tracy out of the backfield, given his wide receiver background. He's even played more quickly and been more productive than I even anticipated. But like you said, they haven't been using him as an outlet receiver. But it's what John's talking. There doesn't seem that, and they seem to be, and again, in Hard Knocks, they were going to let Jones sink or swim, and they went in another direction. Like you said, they seem to have pulled it back in. So it doesn't seem, so nothing right now smells right with this team, and that's where I'm at. John, I will say this: we've got a lot of questions, not a
Sure.
ton,
Let's.
but there a lot of them are draft oriented, and specifically
Yeah.
Colin. So maybe but before we do that though, did you want to finish up with any thoughts or what Colin has said or anything?
Yeah, no, I think we're all on the same page. I will say I can honestly say right now I'm 100% in the Daboll should go. I'm not. Oh, I'm 50%. Like I think Colin, you said you were 50%. I think I'm roughly 50% on Shane. I kind of like Shane a little bit. You and I talked about this, Eric, before, and Colin, I don't know if you heard this or not, and I used the term, there's kind of this organizational arrogance about I feel like Shane and Daboll, Hard Knocks is a reality show. We all get that. The problem is it does highlight what potentially you may not want it to be seen that way, but that's how it came off, was a very arrogant sort of, first off, I'm the last person who can comment on the use of certain language. Okay. Outside of this, I tend to drop the F-bomb here or there. Watching Daboll do it with John Mara in the room, talking about Nabers and all this stuff, I felt like after a while, I'm kind of like, geez, is this our head coach? Like, I don't know if I want him talking to the owner, dropping F-bombs to describe the guy over and over and over again. It seemed a little much. The way he kind of came off and the way Shane came off, and one of the worst moments in that whole series, and we've talked about it, I brought it up over and over again, is Daboll comes into the room, talks to Shane about Bowen, and starts going through like a list. Oh, here's where he ranked on this, and here's where he ranked on that. I'm like, first off, Shane already knows this. You already interviewed these guys. You didn't hire the guy and just walked in and told Shane, hey, by the way, I hired a new defensive coordinator. No, they know that already. Shane's not letting you make a decision on the staff without at least having like a say, yay or nay. They looked into his background first. You don't just walk in and go, hey, by the way, I just hired this guy. Look at his stats. He's great. It was embarrassing to that point. So I'm okay with Daboll going. Schoen, I'm like, boy, his drafts have not worked out well. But like you said, that's a crapshoot anyway. It's the veteran. It's the decision making with the veterans. It was the contract with Jones. But the question that none of us can honestly answer is, where did Mara play in that role? Did he say you're signing him? Was Daboll the guy who said? We don't know. So there's no point in talking about it. But I'm with you. Daboll should go. I'm 50-50 on the general manager though, as far as that goes. So if you want to switch to the
Yeah,
questions, I mean, I know quarterbacks are going to be way
yeah,
up.
and a lot of these are related, but it's the first one is actually going to hit home. And again, a lot of fans are thinking this way, and it's from Jay on the island, and he'd like to know from Colin how right now how he ranks this year's quarterbacks, and in your opinion, which one would you expect to be at the Giants' wish top of their wish list? So I know that's a kind of a loaded question.
Yeah, well, I don't rank them myself because I couldn't care less what I rank them. What we do is kind of try and make sense of what how the National Football League
Hmm.
has them ranked right now, and it's really tough to get a feeling on this whole draft, or at least the top 10. Um, there are two guys right now, and only seem to be two guys right now. It's Sanders and Cam Ward, who are being considered top 10 guys. It seems more they're, a little bit, they're not in the same class anyway as that Caleb Williams and Jalen Daniels and people like that. Um, but they're also very good prospects. So it's going to be a tweener for the Giants. My guess is if they end up with a shot at one of those two guys, they take it. Um, I think the other thing is that last year we talked about Neighbors being a really special talent available to them. I don't see that right now with the other players that are going to be available in the
Hmm.
top 10. Some good players there, some potentially useful guys, but I don't think there's anybody who's a potential superstar, at least as a prospect.
Hmm.
So. And the other thing is, you talk about sticking with your board. Um, the rule of thumb is in the National Football League is that you kind of throw your board away when it comes to quarterbacks.
Right, right, right.
The position is just so valuable. And that's why could have made an argument to support taking a quarterback last year, even though he wasn't as highly rated as the guy they took. The positional value is just so much more if he works out and is a good player. He's going to change your team much more than say a receiver is. So you know it's a tough thing. One of the alternatives is, of course, you say, well, we won't take the quarterback this year. We'll wait till next year. It's probably going to be a better year next year, but you just have no idea where you're going to be
Hmm.
picking. Um, as I say, I don't think this team is as far away as 2-10 right now. We still got a long way to go to be a real true championship team. But I could see a good coach coming in here and at least being 500 and picking closer to the middle of the first round, and then you're not going to get a quarterback. So
With
I'm
the quarterbacks in mind that you were just talking about, real quick, we have the six. We have Williams, we have Daniels, we have May, and then we had what, McCarthy, Pennix, and Nix. Where would Sanders and Ward, out of those six, would they slot ahead of any of those others in terms of what you've looked at from last year and this year, or would they be like 7, 8 in terms of that list of
I think
six?
they'd be in the mix with Pennix, McCarthy,
Okay,
and probably not quite as high as McCarthy, but in the mix with those three guys.
okay.
Again, they're being rated somewhere 5 to 15, kind of a thing in that range, and so there's going to be an awful lot of sorting out to be done in the post in the pre-draft process. I mean, all the quarterbacks, and there's quite a few good ones. I mean, it's a deep class, and I'm not sure there's a whole lot of range between the guy who's maybe first and the guy who's 15th. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the Miami Syracuse game on Saturday.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Really entertaining football game. But you know, if you were just arrived in from Pluto or someplace like that, and you were watching the game, and somebody said, "Well, who's the first round draft pick?" Uh, you'd say, "I think it's that guy from Syracuse.
Yeah.
Right,
He
right.
looks really good." You know, and Kyle McCord leads the country in passing overall. You know, you know, that we got to 10, 12 really good quarterbacks. Two or three of them are going to be really good players in the end. But there ain't nobody in the National Football League anywhere who can tell you who those three are.
Right.
You go with the guy that you have the shot at because he's probably got a slightly better chance. But who knows at this point in time? But certainly, I'm looking at the schedule. We've talked about the Giants. Hard to see them winning a whole lot of ball games. Jacksonville's already got what they got to play Tennessee twice. They got to play the Jets and they got to play the Raiders. So, you know, some of those teams are going to win football games. Hard to see the Giants don't end up with the first or second pick this year and and get a shot at one of those two guys. You know, we also know that Shane went out to see Sanders at Colorado last week. Again, you can go out and see the guy and say, I don't like him. But you know, usually you only do that once your scouts all have a pretty good grade on him anyway.
And they had a
Yeah.
lot of people there, didn't
Well,
they?
they did, and a note on that is that's the second time
Second
because
time, right?
Brown went out there like 2 weeks or 3 weeks
Mhm.
before, and he addressed the team and he had talked to a bunch of the Colorado players. So this is the second time
Right.
the Giants organization has gone out to Colorado.
I just want to clarify something that Colin said, if I heard it correctly, because I want to. So you, Colin, tell me if I got this wrong. So when you look at these players, when you do your big board and you're doing this, you're basing this more on what you think the league is doing, not necessarily what you and Pigskin Paul are looking at.
Right.
And I'm not saying that doesn't affect your input, but you're trying to guesstimate what the league thinks, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
you know, my bottom line is, who the heck cares what some guy working out of his basement in Ottawa, Canada thinks? Um, you know, it's
We do, by the way.
Yeah,
We
that's
do.
what
We
you
do.
and then secondly, I want to make sure I heard this correctly. So and I think you said this earlier too. So I know you said this earlier. You had no problem with the Neighbors pick because you saw him as a special player. But if I heard you correctly, so far this year, you don't see a non-quarterback guy that is special to the point where you would pass on maybe that quarterback. There's no one clear cut, in other words, that you would say, "Whoa, we got to get this guy." So you don't
not
see
so
that
far.
yet.
No, you know and again, you're looking at the positions like defensive end, even an offensive tackle, something like that. You know, the positions that go number one. I, that isn't there. I mean, you have some good players. You know, it's kind of interesting. I was talking to a guy earlier today, and you know, right now people are talking about Travis Hunter as being the
Yeah.
number one player. Now he's from Colorado. Um, you know, if you watched a few games from Colorado, you realize that Shedeur Sanders is a far more valuable guy to Colorado than Travis Hunter
Mm.
is, no matter how good a player he is. But yeah, it's just right now there really is no number one guy. You have Hunter, you have the receiver Arizona,
Arizona. Yeah.
Will Johnson, cornerback, Abdul Carter from Penn State. Maybe Kelvin Banks, the tackle from Texas. I don't see any of those guys as being just, you know, an absolute lock type of guy.
Right, and then you just have guys like some people I know. Size talked about him about the defensive tackle from Michigan. And of course, I have visions of Dexter Lawrence next to him. But when's the last time you saw a defensive tackle go in the top five in an NFL draft? I mean, position value is a real thing. So the reason I bring this up is it comes to the second question from True Blue Larry. And this, I think we know the answer now, but he said, would drafting a quarterback with the top 3 pick in April be a reach? And would the Giants be better off going BPA, best player available, at another position? I think we kind of answered that, but it's a good question.
That's not old Larry Ostroff, is it?
No. This is
Yeah, I
this is
know.
Larry Larry writes the history articles for the Giants.
Oh,
And,
neat.
yeah,
Okay.
and he's a huge fan of the show. So yeah.
Any idea whatever happened to old Larry O?
He's still around. He's still
I,
around. I get emails from him every now and then.
Oh,
I
neat,
think
because
he posts
I
yeah.
got to, I met him, stayed at his place, first draft I went to, and of course met him at that. He was part of that gang at Albany, sort of a thing. But yeah, kind of lost touch with him. Yeah, time will tell whether that how that works. A couple of years ago, in the Kenny Pickett year. We thought Pickett and Desmond Ritter and Malik Willis would all go top 10 kind of a thing. Two of those guys ended up in the third round. Last year, we thought there were three quarterbacks, going one, two, three, and maybe wouldn't see any more in the first round. And of course, we had six in the top 12. So you just never know how it's going to play out. But right now, as I said, I don't see a guy of that great value who you're going to pass on the quarterback. And one of the interesting things with the quarterbacks this year is that they're the position has really changed. When we used to think of quarterbacks, the Eli type, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", 240 pounds, who stood back in the pocket with the big strong arms. All of these guys are much more like basketball point guards right now. Their job
Right.
is not to throw the ball down the field as much as move around the pocket and pick out the open guys, sort of a thing, running those kind of offenses. And I watch a guy like Sanders, and it really is amazing how quickly he gets rid of the ball when he decides to go, and from the angles that it comes off his hand. You think there's no way he can pass the ball, and because there's a guy a half a foot from him, and somehow it comes out and gets there, kind of a thing. And I was thinking about, don't want to rail on poor Daniel Jones right now, but the one thing that he really didn't have was quickness. He was a great
Right.
athlete. He had great speed, but he wasn't quick. And
Right.
I was talking to a guy again. You think of how many times, I mean, he's a great athlete, Daniel Jones, but how many times that he went back in the pocket, he was rushed, he escaped the rush and ran up the field for 20, 30 yards, kind of a thing, which quarterbacks do all the time. Very,
Right.
very rarely when you think about it. The designed runs were good,
Right.
but that other stuff, and he did not have the ability, to get rid of the ball quickly, to make those off angle type plays. And so, I mean, even Patrick Mahomes right now, I mean, he is that kind of quarterback in many
Right.
regards. He can get it down the field, but that's what those guys are, and they're a little bit harder to judge because arm strength isn't as important. I mean, it used to be the defining character, and if a guy didn't have it, you could take him out, but none of these guys really have it. So anyway, there are at least two guys there, and there's maybe a third guy, Quinn Ewers,
Mm.
kind of disappeared. Was a top 10, top 15 guy. Then he kind of disappeared a little bit, got hurt. Um, and he's sort of, kind of coming back up in people's minds. I don't think he's going to get into the top 10. You're not going to be taking him with a top 2 or 3 pick, but he is kind
Right.
of an interesting guy. The other option, I know one of the questions you got on BBI today was, what about a bridge quarterback? And the one guy who might be out there, if you don't like the quarterbacks, would be a Sam Darnold type of player.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
and as I said, there's not a whole lot of range between the quarterbacks. So, you can get a guy like a Curtis Rourke or a McCord, 4 or 5 really, pretty good, productive college quarterbacks in your second round if you wanted to go that way and took a player first overall, a different player, with your number one pick. I don't see them doing that. It's a possibility. If when push comes to shove, you say, you know what, the quarterbacks just aren't worth that top 10 pick, and we're better off going with the
Well, it's
best player.
interesting. We could have a whole show on quarterbacks,
By
but it's
itself.
interesting that fans will react, and I'm guilty of this too, to the latest game and the latest season. So we don't know what Nick's is going to be like 3 years from now. But of course, people are seeing what he's doing right now. But if you look at the discussion about Nick's last year at this time, and going into the draft, he wasn't on anybody's. Very few fans were talking about him. He was clearly the sixth guy that,
Sure.
and no, but now people are acting like, well, how the heck did you pass on him? There were a lot of people, not a lot of people, not a lot of fans were talking about him. And some of the quarterbacks that, I've been touting because I'm in the DC area, how great Jaden Daniels is doing. And I think he's going to be a special player, but we don't know what he's going to be like. We saw RG3. RG3 looked phenomenal his rookie year, and of course he got hurt, and then his career fell apart. So the whole quarterback thing's interesting because fans will react to what they see, the latest thing that they've seen. So when you talked about Ewers, I was thinking about, what if he's the guy and he's just having a bad year, or Beck, who's lost some of his weapons, and maybe would it shock anybody 3 years from now, is Beck the best guy that came out of this draft? It's just it's a hard position to judge, and obviously teams don't have trouble judging it.
Well, I think the other thing too, real quick, is that, and we've talked about this a million times, it's not always just the player, it's where the player goes. Brock Purdy, a 7th-round pick, you put him with the Giants, you never probably hear from him. You put him with the 49ers in their system, and he ultimately ended up playing because, Lance didn't work out and Garoppolo was injured. All of a sudden, Purdy's playing, but it's a perfect system for him. And I think Nix and Peyton is a good match. But if you watched the game the other day, he took a lot of really bad chances, just chucking the ball up. But that system really, Peyton's a quarterback whisperer. We know this from our experience with the Giants. I just worry, do we have the quarterback whisperer with Daboll that we thought, or is it more a product of Josh Allen than it was Brian Daboll?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too the other day. Yeah, and I always kind of joke, when people talk about, who are the hot coordinators. The one guy that people are talking about is the OC with the Detroit Lions.
Right.
Ben
Johnson. Yeah.
And the thing is, if he comes here, he's not bringing any of those players. He's a hot coordinator because he's got good players around him. And almost, I want to go find a guy who's maybe not leading the league kind of a thing, but is working with subpar talent and is getting a lot out of them. So that's always interesting. But one of the things with players, and it's at every position, and that is for scouts, it's a really hard thing to do, is to separate the player from the team. That you play on Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State, you're going to look a whole lot better than a kid playing for Vanderbilt or a school like that. The other thing that kind of happens is that a guy has a streak and he's really good, and it gets built in. Trevor Lawrence, when he arrived, was literally the number one guy. The moment he stepped on the campus at Clemson, and the one little tiny thing that bothered me about Lawrence was that he really never got a whole lot better over his college career. But he was kind of locked in as that number one guy, and nobody, nobody changed whatever. Last year, Caleb Williams had his grade was really based on the previous year. He didn't have such a very good year last year, but again, that was baked in that he was the number one guy based on what he'd done the previous year. So there's always that kind of stuff going on, which really complicates the stuff. But it just makes the job all that more difficult. But they're kind of things you have to keep in mind. And for fans, I tell people, that scouts really don't watch games. If they do watch games, they're breaking down plays. But we as fans, we watch the games, and and that's pretty much it. Where in fact, you are really dependent on the rest of your team around you, or at least far more than. But what scouts will do is they will break down literally every play. So if you play on a team that doesn't get rushed a whole lot, you're going to weight those plays so that you're putting numbers for everybody, the same kind of a thing. So you weight them in that regard so that it takes a little bit of that bias out of the measurement. At the same time, I've been joking of late that somebody should go back into the 1950s and 1960s, and look at the results of the draft, and how many players work out and all that sort of stuff. That what we did in those days was we took the best players in college football basically, and drafted them one way or another. The whole draft process was that was pretty random, and it didn't work very well. That everyone tried to put a whole lot of numbers and everything else on that, on the whole process. But ultimately, it comes down to, what do we still do? We still take the best players in college football, and it's all gussied up and everything else like that. But there is something strange with guys going to the NFL. And it's something I don't really understand, is why are some guys successful taken in the seventh round, and some guys taken in the first round, who have great pedigrees, not successful. And my own theory is that it's something like, you have to be able to play the game at the speed the NFL game is played at, which is way faster than the college game. And you're not going to know if your kid can play at that speed until you actually get him in an NFL game, and that's how it works. So anyway, I'm not sure that the whole process is just a gussied up, picking all Americans. Maybe you think
Lottery. It's just a
you
lottery.
think of last year, you think of
See,
last year, the top two guys were both Heisman Trophy winners. Uh, Pennix and Nix were the top two passers in college football. McCarthy was the quarterback of the unbeaten national champions. So so in the end, that's maybe all we're doing.
yeah,
But
I think it
it's
was
probably the best
Mara,
we can do.
the
So
father, who
anyway,
used to
it's
look at
fun.
the old. Oh, I was going to say, I think it was Mara Senior who used to look at the old sporting news guides and pick guys out of all American lists or something like that. So we have a really good question here from someone who,
Right, and rather famous. No,
what, we lost you.
Yep. There
What
we
did
go.
you say, Colin?
have you lost me?
No,
Oh,
we're
we got you
back.
back. You
Hello?
got you back.
Okay, yeah,
All right, so we have a really good question here
I'm
from
here.
Angel. Can you hear me?
I think there's a
Yep.
slight delay. So yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so Angel Eyes, who seems to be an avid fan, said 3 years ago you posted a piece about structural problems with the Giants' defense as a 3-4 team, but with a lot of even man looks that hamper them. 3 years later, and despite changes in defensive coordinators and approaches in defense, man versus zone and blitzing versus bend but don't break, it appears those similar problems still hamper them because the Giants can't seem to commit to one defensive front and the personnel required, with two defensive coordinators outright saying it doesn't matter. To your mind, what course should the Giants take with assembling more stable defensive front,
Oh.
6 or 7? So
Oh.
then he linked, I think he linked to one of your articles.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. He linked to one of your articles. So he's someone
I
who's
mean,
obviously been reading your stuff for quite a while.
yeah, I'm impressed. That people argue, are we a 4-3 or a 3-4 team? We're a 4-2 team. That everybody plays three wide receivers at least. So we end up with the four guys across the front and the two linebackers. Uh, was it they're normally you know 3-4 outside scrimmage as defensive ends. They can rush the passer there, but boy, you're out outnumbered. You know, they're going to have it with the run defense because they're way undersized. One of the things I would love to see the Giants do, and I'm in the first round, is use their second round on a available Jordan Birch from Oregon. There's a Jared Ivey
We lost
from
you with the second round pick. So what did you say they should do with the second round pick?
Mississippi. So I I'd love to see them take a big defense. Jordan Birch of Oregon, Jared Ivey, Mississippi, guys who can rush the passer, and, and are going to be much more. You can kick those guys inside to defensive tackle and get I'd really like to see them do because we're the other thing I'd love to see, you get a kid like McFadden who is who's really good. You bring him up to the line of scrimmage playing in the backfield, but he's not real fast. And yet we have him lined up 6 yards off the line of scrimmage, basically asking him to run sideline to sideline, which is not his game at all. And but I'd really like to see them, address that defensive line and really, this is a team that lived and died by the motto that you can't have enough pass rushers, but get a little bit bigger on those defensive ends. And again, you look around the league at some of the really good guys there, the Max Crosbys, they're 275 in that area, and our guys are 255, and they're really going to struggle, when they have to defend the run.
I think some of the well, I'll jump in because I've been thinking about this a lot. Some of the gimmicky defenses that people have gone to based on changes in the way the NFL has played, so the passing games, I think have led to a resurgence in the running games, which is why you see a Derrick Henry, a Saquon Barkley, a Josh Jacobs. You see all of a sudden there's a lot more running happening in the NFL. Running games are really starting to pick up again. Why is that? Because teams have gone more to defending the pass. They've opened themselves up, and the Giants are in that in-between land. You called them a 4-2. I, in many ways, look at them as more like a 2-5, depending on how you want to look at it. They literally have one legit defensive lineman. We throw another guy in there who we thought was a legit defensive tackle in Roaches, but he's been hit or miss at best. And then we have almost an empty space at the other defensive spot, a lineman spot, but we play two linebackers who neither one of them is really a super physical presence on the outside, and they're not bringing the pass rush to the way you would think they would overall. We're kind of we're like in a no man's land on defense. I think you have to pick one. We either need to go to a traditional 3-4 and get guys who play a traditional 3-4, or we got to go back to a 4-3, but you got to pick one. Right now, we're not really either, and we kind of play this hybrid, and where I've argued over and over again, Dexter Lawrence is a really good player, upper echelon player. I don't think you can count on Dexter Lawrence being the guy to lead you. He's easy to take out of a game. Ultimately, if you're not getting the push from the outside, they're going to collapse the middle on him. He's a 340-pound guy. He cannot play every snap all game long on defense. He's going to wear down. You can't rely on that one guy by himself, and we've got nobody next to him to even remotely take the pressure off him. The outside guys are not beating their guys one-on-one, so that makes it even harder overall for the one main guy. The guy who, if you put him on, you take Dexter Lawrence and you drop him on, you use the Raiders. I'll say you drop him on the Raiders with Max Crosby to his outside, and I think they have, Colin Farrell, I think is one of the other guys. You're not blocking him. You're not stopping that defensive line. But for us, you take Lawrence out,
yes,
you've opened the middle of the field.
Well, completely. I think it's clear what Colin said, and we've talked about this since early on. They're short on the defensive line. And I've said again that one of their biggest losses was Ashawn Robinson. And I think if he had been next to Dexter, we would be having a different discussion. But I
Right.
think Colin made a really interesting point earlier on in the conversation when he said he doesn't see a lot of schematic difference between Wink up front and Shane Bowen up front.
Right.
And I think we're kind of he's right in that, in the sense that we're seeing the same results. So I know people like MS on the website have been harping lately, and he's right that we're at some point we're going to have to address the defensive line in a big way, because they don't have the bodies up front, and they're not going to beat Philadelphia and Washington and the Cowboys moving forward with this defense. I don't know if it's going to be Shane who's going to be making these picks or somebody else, but they've got to address this. So I just want to move on real quickly because
Yeah, let's
we
get
got a few
others.
more questions. DCG man, his first question we already answered about the quarterbacks, but he did have a second question about the quarterbacks, about asking Colin if he had any preliminary thoughts on the 26 class. Maybe it's too early. I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
Yeah, there's some good kids there, and of course we have Arch Manning. You know, there's going to be some fascination with them there. I'm not sure at this point in time you have any great ones in the Williams Lawrence category. There's a lot of good guys there, but I mean, we just don't know about Arch Manning. He really hasn't played very much. And my guess is if Ewers doesn't come out, he's going to transfer, and or one of them's going to transfer anyway. And my guess is it would be Ewers, because I think Texas would really like to go to Manning. So and we'll get a chance to see him next year. But right now, I'm not sure you could say, there's that Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence type of guy out there right now. But there are a number of really interesting guys at this point in time. And it's very likely, I'm thinking that people like Ewers and Milroe and Beck and Alar may all end up going back to school, because right now they're borderline first rounders at best. And
Interesting.
with the NIL money, um, they can make almost as much money, staying in school at those big programs than coming out. So we'll wait and see how that works out. Nessmeyer's the other one at LSU, is a good player. My guess is they stay in school, but we'll have to wait and see.
That's
If
interesting.
if
Okay.
that happens, next year's quarterback class could be
And I was going to say,
interesting.
That
if
would
they
complicate things for
well,
us.
if they do go back, that massively changes the 25 draft overall,
And the
because there are a lot of
26,
teams
yeah.
there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks. So if those guys go back, and I was beginning to going to ask that question too, I'm kind of wondering that too. The one guy that I wonder if he doesn't is Milroe. His connection, Daboll's connection to Alabama, would that potentially be where we might look for that inside piece of that connection piece to give Daboll a guy that he might be familiar with, or with people that he knows around that program?
But Daboll's here too, so we don't.
Well, that's the that's the $1 million question.
Yeah. So I know
Daboll's got to be here. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were
Yeah,
saying,
okay. I'll just say the one guy, I do have my personal preferences, and I'll put my hand up and say I really liked Nick's last year. That
Good call.
I just thought he was extremely productive. I'll put my other hand up and say, at one point in the past, I really liked Akili Smith, another Oregon quarterback. So it is kind of hit and miss. Milroe to me just doesn't look like an NFL quarterback. He's a good athlete, although he's not really all that fast, but he's a big kid, and he has a pretty quick first step. But he just does not look like an NFL passer when he throws the ball. He looks like a good athlete throwing the ball, kind of a thing. If he's got a clean pocket, he's okay. If he is rushed or anything like that, he kind of struggles a little bit. So he'd be the one guy. Again, if he were there in the second round, you might say, okay, let's take a flyer on this guy. But I don't see him being certainly I don't see him ending up being a top 5 guy. Never can tell though.
And BW and DC, who's the one who asked if we could ask questions, I'm glad he did. He said, Colin and I have rarely agreed.
Oh, BW. Okay, yeah.
Yes,
Really
on
is keep putting it mildly. Yeah.
so but he said I'd be curious to hear his thoughts on what positions have the most depth in this draft. He says edge, and then he also asks, do you view Hunter as an NFL corner or wide receiver? And then lastly, which preseason top prospect has slid the most? And he said, e.g., Luther Burden. So
Oh,
there's two
okay.
questions there.
He's disappeared.
Like, yeah, he's kind of gone out of the top 10 kind of a thing. You know, I've who's slipped the most. My phone is ringing here, driving me crazy. I'm going to put you know, off the top of my head here, I'm going to put the quarterbacks in there, um, just as a group kind of a thing. The interesting thing about this draft is that you know, we talk about the top 10 is kind of amorphous right now. It's you know, there are a lot of good guys there. Nobody's really standing out, but there is a lot of depth in this draft. Edge rusher is one. Defensive tackle is
I'm
another.
sorry, is or is not?
Is one.
Is.
There's a lot of
Oh,
depth
okay.
in this draft. There's a lot of depth at quarterback. There's a lot of good running backs out there. As I said, the defensive line is really, really deep. The Giants would have a chance to get a pretty good player at defensive tackle that maybe you could pair up with Dexter as late as the third round. I mean, that's going to be 65 kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Again, may not be a guy who's going to rush the passer a whole lot, but the potential is there. It's a very good year at cornerback.
Hmm.
I'd even say there's a lot of depth at a position like linebacker, which isn't an early position, but again, there's a lot of depth at a lot of positions in this draft. Even on the offensive line, there's some good big offensive tackles that are going to be available into the third, fourth round. Same at offensive guard. Maybe the only positions, excuse me, that aren't really deep, center and safety. They would be maybe the only two that aren't deep. So there's been kind of draft where I'm not a big fan of, you know, piling up your middle round draft picks. But if you could do that in this draft, it probably wouldn't be the worst thing that could happen to you.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was thinking, darn it, why didn't we trade Slayton and Ojulari? But that's neither here
Yeah.
nor there. But and then his
Once
last
again.
question was the Hunter as the corner or the wide receiver. Do you like him better at one position over the other?
Boy, that's a tough one. I think he would have a bigger impact on a team as a wide receiver, especially on a team that has where he wasn't the number one guy. Remember, he's not a real big guy. He's only
No,
about
he's not.
6'0", 185. Um, and he's a funny kind of receiver that he doesn't really do anything real well, but he's really good with the ball. After that, um, I think he could be a really, really good cornerback in the National Football League. Wouldn't have the same impact on your team if he was good, but you know, of course, if you're a team like the Giants, hey, let's play them both ways because we got issues both ways, kind of a thing. But it's really going to depend on the team that he goes to. If he were coming to the Giants, I'd kind of like to see him go to cornerback. I think he could be a Pro Bowler in the same category as Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley kind of a guy. Whereas I don't think he's going to be a you know, Justin Jefferson,
Hmm.
Tyreek Hill kind of
Right.
wide receiver sort of a thing.
We have
But a guy like him would save you a roster spot
Well,
if
that's it.
you want to
Yeah.
go like sixth wide receiver or fifth whatever you want to say. Hey, we can always play him 15 plays a game at wide receiver if we need to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you know who would know how to use them? Bill Belichick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
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 Well,
we
I
have
was gonna say, you know who does know how to use them?
Hmm.
Deion Sanders, who used to
Deion
play
Sanders, yeah.
15 plays at wide receiver while being a defensive back.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, we have three questions left. One's from Joey Big Blue, who asks about a guy you just mentioned, the Penn State quarterback, Drew LR. Do you have any thoughts on him?
Yeah, again, he fits the Eli Manning mold type of quarterback. He's a great big guy. He's actually a half decent athlete. along the lines of Daniel Jones. Big, strong arm, probably the strongest arm in this draft class. Um, and as good arm talent, the issue with him is you get him under a little bit of pressure, and his game kind of falls apart a little bit. And this is his first really good year. You'd like to see him come back. He's just a third year guy. And love to see him go to a team that actually throws the ball. Penn State run, 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 and then they throw
Right.
it kind of a thing. So it'd be nice to see him move to a school that they did throw the ball a little bit more. Uh, Again, if he came out, the kind of kid, if he were there in the third, fourth round, you want to take a flyer on, be the kind of kid you'd like to bring in and see what he could do. I don't see him as being a first rounder at this point in time, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of arm talent there, no question about that.
Okay, and then Giants fan 79 says any players in this draft who could be a Hall of Famer by the time their career is over. That's a loaded question
Yeah,
too.
well, there are
That's
lots of
hard.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But
That not to put you on the spot. Who's a
yeah,
Hall of
yeah.
Fame?
I guess if there's one guy yeah, okay. The guy I would mention it is Michael Williams. He's defensive end from Georgia. He's 6'5", he's 265, a JPP type of physical
Hmm.
talent. He's never done much at Georgia. He's never been able to live up to that, largely because of injuries. But if there's a kid with upside in this draft, that if he could reach that would be a really special player. He'd be the first one I'd mention.
And
What are your thoughts real quick on Ashton Genty? Boise State running back, possible Heisman Trophy candidate, 5'9", about 216-ish.
I had
Is he a guy that you in the pros you can kind of look, or are you concerned about the amount of wear and tear from college before ever making it into the pros?
No, I don't think so. It's again, he plays on a slightly lower level. Mind you, he went up to Oregon. That team went up to Oregon, and he put up a couple of 100 yards. He is a really amazing running back. In the sense that he has more yards this year after contact than anybody else in the country before contact. He really is a very special talent. Is that going to translate to the National Football League? Who knows? Certainly, again, if you ended up in the middle of the second round, and he was there, you would take him. I suspect he's going to go considerably earlier than that. A lot of people mocking him to Dallas
yeah.
right now. I think that's going to be maybe just a little bit early, but yeah, no, he's a very special talent. He doesn't have the Barry Sanders' elusiveness, but he is fast. He does have a little bit of juice in his hips there, and he's a tough physical runner. Interesting kid, no doubt about it.
Physically, he does fit the mold of Emmitt Smith. They're roughly around the same size, and
Mm-hmm.
that lack of Sanders' dash, but Smith was a very
Mm-hmm.
consistent, very capable, as we know, 1993, damn it,
Don't bring that up.
back
Don't bring
against the
that up.
Giants.
Mm-hmm.
Then the last question we have here, because we're approaching 90 minutes, so
Yeah,
we gotta
yeah.
cut to,
Eh,
is from San Fran Giants fan, and he'd like Colin's view on Nussmeier, and he specifically asked if he thinks he's going to come out, or would he best be served staying one more year? And I think,
Oh, absolutely. He'd
yeah,
be best served staying. Not that long ago, a few weeks ago, that there were even some whispers in the media at LSU. Was he? Maybe he should be benched, kind of a thing. He was struggling a little bit. One of the funny things that happens especially with quarterbacks, we noticed it this year that with the new conferences and all that, especially in the SEC, they schedule cupcakes
mm,
their first four
sure.
games because they know what they got to have to deal with, once their conference starts. And some of these guys, pile up some really impressive numbers. I mean, they just absolutely look like world beaters. I mean, you're playing for Alabama and you're playing Ball State. You're going to do really well. And then they get into the conference play, and it's a whole different story. I haven't seen it the last week or so, but Nussmeier had a completion rate in the conference of something like 55% and almost as many touchdown passes as interceptions. So it's a little bit of the star came off there. But again, yeah, he's a guy who probably should stay. He's a guy who's probably going to stay. Again, he's a third year, just a third year player, and but again, the kind of kid, he's got a lot of arm talent there, and he's fairly mobile. That if you didn't take a quarterback in the first round and you got to the second round and he was one of the kids there, you'd love to bring him in. I don't see him at this point in time being a top 10 type of player.
So you're saying early on in the season when South Carolina played Furman that they were just lining them up for a big old stat game?
Well, that's, I mean, I mean, I don't know if you guys are college football fans.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm a huge college football fan, no matter what. And there's been all this realignment and stuff like that, and with the transfers, that the SEC has emerged simply as so much better conference than the
Yeah.
other ones. Big Ten, the next step back. It's like the NFL. You're going to lose games in the SEC now simply because you're playing really, really good teams every week. And now we still have the college football playoff where they basically go on how many losses you have, which is the way they always did it, kind of a thing. And so yeah, there is that kind of issue there that very possible that the SEC only gets two teams in this final. I'll probably get three, but it has changed things, and it does. For these guys, you're really getting a test now because they're playing tough teams every week, and it shows that their numbers drop off in some cases, not
Right.
always, but in some cases. Anyway, looking forward to the conference championship games this week, and then the playoff games. It is going to be a hoot. It is really going to change the nature of college football if you get Alabama and Ohio State playing in a play-in game in the first 12 sort of a thing. So anyway, looking forward to it.
Well, I don't know, Eric, do we have any other questions?
No, I think that's a good place to stop it. We've been on for 90 minutes and longer than I anticipated, and we could go on and on. I got
Oh,
tons of
yeah. Yeah.
questions, and I'd like to talk to Colin a lot longer. But if I've gotten a lot of emails saying, guys, don't go too long. Don't go
That's it.
too
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
long.
yeah. I don't know if I mentioned this on this here before, but the first draft I went to three drafts back around, when I first started this. What a hoot those were. I mean, they were really fun to go to. But the first one I went to at the end of the first day, they were just 2 days, and at the end of the first day, 9 o'clock at night or wherever at Madison Square Garden, and the people are basically three guys left in the room and a couple of janitors, and I was one of the three, and I got up in the back row and I said, "Hey, where's everybody going? We're just getting started here." And we've been there since 10 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, no, anytime, guys. I love talking
Nice.
Giants football, and there's certainly lots to talk about these days. So anytime, give me a shout.
I've only attended one draft, and it was the Giants draft where they took Jeremy Shockey. And so it was great. And I was sitting and the first time I'd even been to Madison Square Garden, there was and I'm not joking, the entire row behind me was all Raiders fans. And I'm talking Raiders fans that you see when you look in like what they call the black hole.
Yeah.
They're wearing the shoulder pads with spikes. The guy's face is painted. I mean, they were going like ape shit behind me the whole time. And I'm like, oh my God. It was crazy to see that. And that was such a fun draft to be at. Just some of the things that you saw. That's the one that had I think Mike Williams was in that draft, the big offensive
Hmm.
lineman out of Texas.
Hmm.
I mean, it was crazy the people that were there, but I had so much fun at that draft, and now it's a much bigger thing now. They spread it out over 3 days, and I don't know.
Yeah,
Who
no, I
knows?
remember the first time I'd never even been to New York when I went 1998, I guess it was. And I didn't even know if they'd let me in, kind of a thing. And I finally found the door and I went in and you stepped into the room, and man, there was just this incredible buzz. And I kid you not, I'm standing there, I got my mouth falling open. Ricky Williams was on my left, and Dante Culpepper was on my right, and they were both standing there, oh, kind of a thing. And so yeah, no, I'll remember that. It was an exciting time, kind of a thing, in that setting
Right.
where you're right down close to the stage and could talk to the players and all that sort of stuff.
I liked when they had 12 rounds. So,
Right.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
keep it going, yeah.
But well, with that in mind, I think we could look ahead to this weekend. But let's just say this: we want to see the Giants play decently. If they lose, it's probably for the best at the moment. There's really, what are we gaining if we win? Or especially playing other teams that are kind of in that same win-loss area. What you don't want is to be embarrassed, which is what they've been, unfortunately, the few times at home. The Tampa Bay game was embarrassing. That was embarrassing all around. Effort is going to be a big deal. I think as we move forward, it's really going to be, if you see guys, if guys just laid down, if we see, I don't mean to point fingers, but I've picked on this guy all year. If we see a Banks sort of version of, I'm not going to chase a guy, I'm not going to tackle him, and that starts coming up, that'll be the death knell for Daboll, because that means he cannot get these guys to play games, and that'll be the only thing that Merrick could possibly still hold him as, well, they compete, which is pathetic that's where we're at. But we are at the point of, you get a participation award if you just try.
Based on the early injury report, we're going to be undermanned. It looks like Hubbard and Izudu are going to be our tackles. It looks like Okereke might not play. So we'll see. It could get ugly again. So we'll see.
What I'm afraid of is we're going to go out. We have not had a game this year where we've actually had an edge in turnovers. And I'm afraid we're going to have one of these games where, we get 3 or 4 turnovers. We haven't had an interception since the first week of the season.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. There's McKinney out there with what, 7? 6 more.
I know.
7 more than
Leonard Williams returns an interception.
I know. It's like I said, this year couldn't have gone worse, PR wise, for the Giants.
Yeah. And because of the Giants' strength of schedule number, which is very high, boy, you just win one game, and it's going to really mess up the draft spot. You're going to have to now hope that a lot of those 3-win teams win some games. Yeah, anyway, I'm with you, John. I mean, I'm watching the game. I hope they win. I scream at the coaches when they do stupid things. But when it's over, I'm saying, thank the Lord we lost, because we're still
right.
I think
how sad it's gotten.
I really think if you could get a quarterback, it'd make a whole world of difference, because I do think some of the other fundamentals aren't as bad as a 2-10 team looks like. You've got some decent young players, some decent young impact players, still a ways to go. But man, if you could get a quarterback who can play, it would change everything so much. And 1-2 is where you're most likely to find one.
I'm still of the belief that we are going to make a trade in the offseason. It's going to be for a veteran. I think it's going to be for the same veteran that Eric ultimately heard about, that I was already going to say that was my plan. That's what I would have done if I were the Giants. And I think that's ultimately the way they're going to go, because at this point, you go into the offseason, we're going to have nobody. I mean, you can't really count on DeVito. Even if he's there, you can't possibly think he can be the starter. You're really going into next year. You can't just draft a guy. You still need other guys. So there's going to have to be a veteran. I think you're right. I don't think the roster's that bad. It falls apart when the season falls apart because they're so young and you're not winning anything. And that makes it all harder. You fix that one spot and Thomas becomes healthy. You fix a little bit on the inside. You've got receivers on the outside. You know what? Before we go from that, I'd want to stop myself there. Your thoughts on Jalin Hyatt? Is he a bust, or is Jalin Hyatt just a victim of the way this offense has been in general?
Yes. I've never understood why we use him the way we do. He's not a guy who's going to go out and catch 90 passes, but he's a deep threat. if nothing else, I'd be putting him out on the wing and telling him to run like hell down the field on every play, and at least he's going to take a defender with him. Um, I just haven't understood why he isn't out there. Same with Slayton. He seems to have been grossly misused this year. He's a half decent player, but anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
we could go on. We could go
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
For another show.
For another show.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, again, bigblueinteractive.com. I'm always told that I can't just say BBI. It's bigblueinteractive.com.
And the Great Blue North Draft Report.
Great Blue North, which is gbnreport.com. And of course, our guest, Colin Lindsay. So for everybody, like, subscribe, make sure you go and check out GBN Report, and we'll catch up with you again next week. Let's hope for a Giants non-embarrassing loss that leads us to better times next year. All right.
So take care, guys. If I don't talk to you before, have a great holiday season, and
you too.
Best of luck to Giant fans. There's an old saying. It's from a Percy Bysshe Shelley poem. When winter comes, and we got winter here, can spring be far behind? Think about it.
Unfortunately for us,
anyway,
it's been 2011. So, yeah. But we'll catch you all next, and make sure like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll catch you again next time. Thanks.
Take care, guys.